Thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, Margo, for your two films. This beautiful diptych. The first question I'm going to ask is presented itself pretty quickly. It's a little complicated, but it's about doubling, right? And both films have a kind of double subject, right? It's the astronauts and the rectangle, and the other is the moon and the city. And then there's the doubling of the diptych, and they're being screened right now at Chapman College in what's the show called? I forgot.
Uppish. Yeah.
They're being screened together as a diptych. And they clearly have a lot to do with each other in their minimalism and also in the kind of intense doubling that happens with the image and the sound, and then the final doubling, which jumps out at me every time I see it. But it's when the two moons appear, and we realize you're really like working us.
Work. No, it's true. Sorry, I'm just flip right at this moment. Thank you everybody for sitting through the films, and I hope you enjoyed them. Yeah, there is this thing happening, this kind of a language that I've developed with the doubling, tripling, quadrupling of images. These are double, triple, and so on and so forth, exposures, and there's masks, and there's without actually building things like cross dissolves or doing those kinds of it's all in camera effects, but it is, I think of it in terms of almost a Hitchcockian language of imagery where for instance strangers on a train with the crossing of the legs and the crisscrossing of the tennis rackets and the crisscrossing of train tracks and the doubling and the double cross and the double bass and all of that. So that is very much what's happening there. And then with astronauts, there's kind of the two parts to the film, the astronauts versus the color fields, and it's kind of like it's almost like I've juxtaposed this ambiguous language between these performers and the very sort of commanding, insistent presence of the color fields, and there's I think that Pat's music is very much creating an additional kind of, syntax for it.
And your music in the moon phases. Were you thinking about Patrick's music when you were doing your music? You knew already that this would kind of be a diptych.
Yeah, I wasn't. As I made the films, Astronauts was completed, and Pat was working on the music for that film, and I was finishing up Moon Phases and creating the music for that just the way I normally do, just, very much improvisationally. And I was using interestingly enough, I was using an old synthesizer, which is Pat's famous instrument from the 60s. He was a synthesizer pioneer. Now he's, Ableton, like all of the latest software, and he's 80 years old. It's unbelievable. And there I am on the Juno 60, like, so it's hilarious. But no, in fact, I was quite worried about whether or not my music would sort of hold up to his music and things like that. And then finally I realized, no, this is a diptych. These two pieces really belong together.
Your music doesn't try to compete. I think that's why it holds up. Right? It does something very different, and it actually plays on a much lower subterranean scale, right? Yeah,
exactly. It's allowing. I feel like the music that I created for Moon Phases is kind of allowing Moon Phases to do its thing, because its language is very much visual with all of the double and triple exposures and mattes and things that I created. Whereas I feel like Pat's music lends another layer of communication to astronauts.
In astronauts, there's an interesting tenderness between the astronauts, but also anonymity. We can't really see their faces or read their expressions, hear what they're saying. We're not sure if they can hear or see. There's a lot of work through gesture. And then they're studying something, right? Often there's something in the hand that we don't see, and then the middle section is the color fields. Are we meant to interpret the color fields as the object of study, or is it a break? It's a break. You know, it kind of operates on a couple levels. One, it's a break. It also offers a possibility that, you know, maybe that's what the performers are discussing. You know, there is some kind of conflict going on with them that they're trying to work out, and it's not an emergency, you know, but something's going on. We're not sure what it is, and I like that it's very kind of, you know, you know, it's ambiguous what's happening. And I feel like the color fields are just absolutely clear about what they're doing, you know, and the transitioning of colors and the transformation of colors is this kind of, you know, just, you know, there's a lot of authority to it. It's insistent, but it's, yeah, I don't know, it's kind of wonderful to me.
Is the color field also all in camera, and are you using a mask and just changing the lights? So there's no post-production on either of these. There's no post-production effects.
Correct. There's no post-production. It's basically, I came to filmmaking by way of animation, but not with drawings or cartoons, with more of like the motion graphics, which uses a classic animation camera stand, or at least it used to. Now it's digital, but back in the day, film titles and motion graphics and moving titles and title sequences and Saul Bass and Pablo Ferro and these people, you know, my idols, my heroes, made work by, instead of lighting a drawing, top lighting a drawing, you backlight a film, which is basically opaque and then clear, and then you imbue it with color. And you can do, you know, any number of things with that, effects and stuff. So yeah, it's all in camera.
How much, in what sense are you a pure formalist, and in what sense are you working very much in a set of questions about technology, science fiction, the future, the present, the city, right? The city that is both kind of alienating but also becomes very warm, I would say, right? Becomes very loving, although it could be very threatening.
Yeah, you know, film it provides the possibility to do, you know, things that we might be thinking as filmmakers in our heads, you know. It's like an inner thinking that I guess substitutes for language. And, you know, this is a huge subject, but what was the question?
Are you a formalist?
Oh, yes. I admit, I confess, I'm definitely a formalist. I'm a Russian formalist. Really am a formalist.
Yes, Natasha. How much in your kind of thinking about film language, the camera itself, how influenced were you by CalArts and the kind of emphasis on structural film in particular?
I, as I said, came to film by way of, you know, making art on, you know, objects. the you know, static objects. And you know, I was working in the field of, you know, special effects and things like that, and I became fascinated with the camera. So I started making film on my own after hours, and just going for it and experimenting and doing, you know, just became very obsessed with it and ran with it. The first film I made was, as I described, motion graphics. It was basically like international symbols, some medical, some having to do with traffic, you know, just very like bold things like arrows and eyes and mouths that were open, and just, you know, a little bit of animation going on there. Motion graphics, basically. And then my second film was completely live action. It was like a found film collage that I mixed in with my own footage that I went out and shot. And so I had this body of work that I was building, and then I went to Cal Arts, and what I decided, I had always wanted to go to Cal Arts, you know, and I went there to really, really demystify all of the questions that dabbling into film raised. You know, it's like the more I did, the less I knew, the more desperate I was for more knowledge about this practice that I wanted to develop. So Cal Arts was a place where I got to just absolutely dive in and immerse myself, and I lived with my head under a camera for several years.
Yeah, there's a great, I know from knowing you, your own kind of particular relation with the camera and the film stock, the film itself, the lens, the light. And I want to ask about, love and intimacy in these two, because they're overtly, they're kind of about the alienating things that science fiction often is about, right? Which is the way that technology kind of carries us away from ourselves. And yet, there's the real tenderness between the astronauts, but then in a much more abstract way, there's a kind of I first interpreted moon phases as being about the moon, but it's not about the moon. It's also about the city, and it's about this city, right? And this kind of flirtation that happens between them, right? And of course, the moon's a symbol of love. But there's something to me that also involves thinking really in non-narrative terms, right? And maybe even non-human terms, but about intimacy and about love.
I don't know anything about love. My mother once said that to me. She said, "You don't know anything about love." And I never heard that, because I thought it was so funny. Yeah, there is an intimacy with the characters in Astronaut. The performers are coming from a place of love, first of all, that they're participating.
They know each other.
Yeah, I think they just met that day, and they were all close friends of mine. One that I met at school, and you know, the other two were very dear friends of mine. So yeah, it's all about a relationship and trust, and they're all creative people. They're all, you know, all three of them are artists or filmmakers, or one's a designer, one was an artist, and one was a filmmaker, is an artist. And there is this thing about trust between performers and taking those kinds of risks and directing people that way. And yeah, it comes across. It comes across in their performances, that they're having a good time, that they're so in sync. They're just so in sync. And I'm so lucky that they, you know, did what they did. And you know, I was operating 2 cameras at once. I think I shot that film simultaneously in Super 8 and in 16mm, and it was just me and them. And I shot it, obviously, MOS with no sound, and I'm just barking stuff at them the whole time, like, don't look at me, don't look at the camera, no. Okay, just keep talking to each other, this and that and everything, and we were just like, just going for it, going, and we did it all, you know, in one afternoon. And You know, I really love working with other artists because they just have this amazing work ethic, first of all, and wonderful problem-solving skills, and they really understand. With Moon Faces, it's me, the lone filmmaker, you know, like grabbing my gear, throwing it in the back of my car, driving, hurrying, loading, you know, just trying to capture that moon. I'm literally chasing the moon each and every time I shoot it. There's no pre-plan.
Yeah.
There's no pre-plan. I wasn't like with a moon calendar or knowing on what day, you know, what moon to be expected when or anything like that. And one time I even called a friend. I said, hey, I need you to take me to Mulholland. You know, take me to that spot in Mulholland. I don't know how to get there. Just drive, please. And I love your car. And there's a great, you know, trunk. And let's, please. You know, and then another time I went to a friend's house, you know, who had a fabulous deck. And, you know, so it's yeah, it's all about my relationships.
Yeah, it comes across in the with the astronauts. We're never clear if they're being directed or if they're improvising, you know. And I think that's
a little of both.
It's a little of both, and I think that your closeness to them makes you able to bark at them, right, without them barking back or backing down or
and
walking
they
out.
were enjoying each other, thank God. And but that's so perceptive of you to be able to see that and to bring that to the floor, because it's something that I think about and that I have, but I don't ever really sort of discuss it, you know.
Yeah. I want to open this to the audience in a second. But I guess I also want to ask about science fiction and your own kind of relationship to science fiction, which is pretty telegraphed, I think, in both films, and in particular, you know, it might be a cliche, but in particular, Stanley Kubrick, and that, you know, the color field / monolith, right, that sort of begins and ends, and here it kind of is this fulcrum, it's the central point. But how much do you think about, don't worry, do you think about science fiction, or where is it feeding in? I mean, in the places we can see, but maybe in places we can't see.
It's huge. It's in my DNA. Sci-fi for me was one of my, you know, favorite things growing up, and you know, Kubrick's Space 2001 is something that I'm still daily trying to recreate somehow. And there have been several permutations of my own recreations of it, or my own sort of interpretations of it, like just taking sections and trying to, you know, this is part of my demystification of filmmaking at Cal Arts was basically, okay, how do I do the slit scan scene in Space 2001? So yeah, it's a big deal for me, and something that I love about astronauts is that it allows me to have sort of attended to both things, live action and my love of the graphics in early sci-fi films. I also love the, you know, apocalyptic, you know, Dionysian, you know, new kinds of, you know, sci-fi that we have now, but the earlier formal sci-fi was really my bag.
Comes through. There's something about, for me also in my relationship to sci-fi, it's about my relationship to film. Like, film is sci-fi, and I think for you, the camera, there's something about the camera and your insistence on the primacy of the camera and the kind of astonishing effects that come out, which I mean, you listed some of them, right? The masks, the double exposures, triple, quadruple, but also the bleeds, the blurs, the lens flares, right? All the kind of stuff that doesn't usually make it, right? Which you love.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the almost the detritus of experimenting with film. Yeah, I'm in love with the camera, with the all.
have many different cameras that do different things, and it is very much a love affair with them, and with the possibilities and the things that I can do, the effects that I can make in camera, because I don't have the budget to go out and say, okay, now I'm going to hire you, Photocam, to do my opticals. No, I have to do everything because I'm sort of financing my own work, and so yeah, I love the apparatus for sure, but I'm not insistent on film. Versus digital capture. I'm open to that too, and I use it whenever I can. If I'm ever commissioned to do something or hired to do something commercial, I always shoot it digitally, and I love that experimentation too, and I get great results that way as well. But yeah, I have a special thing with film. My own.
Can we open it up to the audience? Can you hold up your hand?
Questions?
We're gonna bring you a mic so that we have it all recorded.
Okay.
Well,
Hi.
Hi.
Okay. My question, I guess it's, watching them, you talked about being a formalist, and you talked about the emphasis of science fiction and mentioned Kubrick, but I also noticed a strong affect, especially with the music, and especially with moon phases, where parts where the very high-pitched, and just the moon and also the thing like with the fly. And also when the two moons were together, you could see the faces on the moons, and it looked almost like Greek goddesses screaming or something. With this, there's something very not that kind of clean structural thing happening. There was like more, I don't know, if you could speak to the affect of the work too.
Yeah, that's a good question, a good comment, because people have had very, very spiritual experiences with moon phases, and I'm not being funny, truly. People have felt sort of transported by it, or almost high from it. I've heard a lot of things about the experience of watching moon phases. So yeah, that's very different from the sort of, hard-edged graphical nature of the early sci-fi aesthetic. True. And then on the other hand, astronauts is, so clearly indebted to, Joseph Albers, and I feel like I've been kind of, performing his exercises and experiments for a lifetime. So yeah, both things are going on in both films, which is nice for you to mention. Thank you.
In moon phases, the two moons and what you said about affect, right? Like, to me, affect would be one way of phrasing it. Mine more was like hypnosis, right? It was a kind of rhythmic, insistent rhythmic quality, and I think that's not far from a spiritual quality, and also not far in a way. It's also related. It's a cousin to a philosophical or a speculative quality. Like what are these things? What is the city in which we live that makes this, completely bewildering light landscape, right? It's totally unnatural, right? The lights that sort of come at us sideways instead of from above. So I think a lot of that is being played with, and I think it's fine. I don't think it matters so much, right? Whether it's interpreted affectively, spiritually, kind of hypnagogically, or even philosophically. I think what matters is that it has that working on us.
Yeah, it's kind of a ballad to the city.
Yeah.
And it has many possibilities, the way it's going to resonate with different people.
We have a question over there.
So I want to ask about, and Margo's my dearest, closest friend, by the way.
Hi, Nina.
Hi. I'm really kind of speaking to your question about the romance or the love between the city and the moon, and what that relationship is between the nature of the moon. It is hypnotic for me when I watch it, kind of like watching a fire. It feels naturally hypnotic watching the moon, and then the cityscape of it disappearing and coming back and being present and being part of this nature. But anyway, I wanted to know what your experiences or take is on that relationship to the moon and the city.
Yeah, I have become aware of the moon since, I guess, living where I live on top of a mountain, which is kind of like it's the perfect perch for moon watching. And there's actually a small park near me that's called Moon Park. And it's almost like I have a new adult relationship to the moon, is what it seems like. Because there have been times when I've burst through the front door saying to my partner, what is going on with the moon? Like, it's never looked like this before. Am I different? Have I changed? Or is the moon changing? What's happening? So there's just a wonderment around it. And we had some phenomenal moons this last year, and I had to go out and capture it. But yeah, it's a ballad to Los Angeles and the cityscape. And there's almost something, am I crazy? There's something almost film noir-ish about, there's like this kind of melancholic thing going on with it too when I watch it, and I think it's because of the warm colors, and we worked really hard on the color. We really, really dialed it in. I'm very happy with the lab.
It's hard not to get noirish with LA in the night, especially, right? Even in the day, but particularly at night.
It's true.
Both of these seem like nocturnal pieces.
They
Yeah.
are.
You want to say something about the night?
I am working on a film now, and I've been working on this film for a couple years, 3 years. That is a totally live-action experimental spy film, and a lot of it takes place during the day. And there's every place. There's Los Angeles, there's Istanbul, there's Tokyo, there's Oslo, and so this was really me just hunkering down on that sort of the field of space, that sort of like not star field, but space field.
I have a question. I'm microphone, so I've got a big voice. Okay. Hey, Margo.
Hi.
I have a question that is, how do you feel about, you've got two films, one of which someone else has scored and the other one you've scored. How do you feel about handing off your film to someone else? Because when I listen to those two films together, the first one is very it's very constructed musically, and the second one is very organic, and it takes you, I think, on a different kind of journey. And I just wondered why did you decide to have someone else score the astronaut film and not the moon film, and how do you feel about doing that, and then giving that over to someone else?
Yeah, I'm just happy to hear from musicians that are here tonight, because there's a few of you, and composers, and it's very interesting to hear from y'all about this, because for me the sound aspect of both of these films, which is, there's so many possibilities for sound. It could be diegetic sound, or what I've got, which is just simply music. But there's still like sort of a language and a syntax going on for each one. I think they're both successful soundtracks. The question you asked is, you know, how did I come to the decision? You know, I never hand any aspect of my films over to other people. I may have tried it very early on, and it didn't work out, and I was out of there. And I knew I would never do it again. This was very fortuitous. Pat Gleeson was someone that I wasn't aware of until it was brought to my attention that he's sort of having a renaissance. And I was at a screening where his music was being sort of featured, and he scored films for some of the big daddy experimental filmmakers. Very famously, he did the beginning of Crossroads for I think of the name of the filmmaker right now. Somebody yell it out. Yeah, Bruce Conner, thank you. And he did, you know, he's done many, but this was back in the day. And then he had a whole lifetime of doing commercial and Hollywood film. And so I went to the screening of Bruce Conner's films, and I recognized him as my neighbor. And I went to say hi to him, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm an experimental filmmaker, you know? Like, this is crazy." And he said, let's do something. And I said, okay. And he really wanted to come to my studio, look at films, and he said, "I'd love to score a film, you know, of yours. How do you feel about it?" And I said, "I'd be honored, you know." And of course, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, you know. But what he did is, I think, phenomenal. But yeah, it's very structured. It's very different from how I work. I'm very improvisational, and I love making music for my own films. But I also am very happy that Pat did this. I'm happy with his music. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Okay.
I can ask one too. I'm sitting right next to her.
Okay.
Hi. In astronauts, it seems like, you know, they're looking and referring to something that you can't see, and then, you know, the rectangles don't really feel like what they're looking at. I don't know if it is, but it doesn't feel that way to me. So then when moon phases came on, it's hard not to make a connection to what they were looking at. And then, so that puts me in the body of the astronaut. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. That's really interesting.
But I was wondering why there were 3 astronauts.
I don't know.
Thanks.
We just ended. We could end there. It's a note of great certainty.
Thanks, Andy.
It's nice. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Thank you, Matias.
Thank you.